Hey everybody, welcome back. It's me, your old pal Orpheus, and we are here, yes, with another edition of Orpheus Plays. And although we are here in the home environment of blatant sorcery, this is really going to be another one of my episodes where I talk about some things that have happened to me in life that may also have happened or are happening to you right now, and some of the experiences and how that shaped me. So if that's not something that you're interested in right now, or you're not in like the right headspace to discuss things that are a little bit more emotional, feel free to tune into any of my other wacky playlist kind of videos. I tell a lot of really cool stories. At least I think so. Maybe you guys do too. Who knows? Um, but go check those out. I do a lot of slash and smash and all that stuff. It's something I do to kind of work out some of my anger and my angst. And also, it's a nice backdrop for being able to take you guys along for some cool stories. Today, though, I wanted to talk about something that I grew up dealing with. I didn't find out till just recently, within the last 5 years or so. I've been dealing with PTSD for most of my life. And a lot of people out there are dealing with it too. There's been a lot of events that have happened in the last, couple of decades that have really scarred a lot of you out there. And I know, I see it, I feel it, right? And it can come from all sorts of places. It can come from natural disasters, like if you survive through a hurricane or a tornado or an earthquake, and it's particularly awful, or it doesn't even have to be particularly awful. If it was awful to you, then it can impact you differently than it impacts anybody else. But there's also things where it comes from, like military service. If you were someone that went through harsh environment and had to see some things that regular people don't have to see most of the time, that can leave you feeling, well, we'll go into sort of how PTSD affects you a little bit later, but it can affect most people, if not all people who have it, kind of have challenges that they deal with. And that's okay. If you're someone that has this deep-seated fear and anxiety and almost like a hatred for certain things in the world, you get jaded really fast, right? And PTSD can also come from places like social media. If you, a lighter version, don't go jumping the gun here. If you're scrolling through and there's some person that you follow, or there's a promoted tweet or something that is particularly violent, or that triggers something, maybe a memory from your childhood where you were abused or something, or it can trigger thoughts of the thing that originally put you in that state of mind where you feel vulnerable all the time. This is a difficult video for me to make, just like some of the other ones are, because this is something that is very personal to me, and it has shaped a lot of who I am. And it did it without me even realizing at points that that's what was affecting me. PTSD is a very influential condition. Everything that you do is almost always, filtered through that viewpoint and that condition. Now, like I've told you in another video, you're not defined by that condition, but it can sometimes be unavoidable. For me, let me tell my story about this, and this is kind of a hard one for me to do. Like I said, I grew up in a very abusive family, very abusive setting. My father was a man who I don't think I ever loved. It was more, it wasn't even respect either, right? I feared him. I feared him every time that he would come home. I've learned how to walk on eggshells, almost quite literally, tiptoeing around, because making noise when I was growing up meant that they would pay attention and notice what I was doing. And I always tried to shield myself by being really quiet, really silent, not trying to arouse any anger or ire or violence. And one good example of the abuse that I went through, I was in school, elementary school, I think it had to have been, and I was having trouble with my multiplication tables. And I was getting in low grades because of it. And the school called my house and talked to my mom. And the thing about having a family business, if your parents or some family member runs a family business, the side effect that can come with that is they can come home almost anytime they need to, right? So if mom calls and you're in trouble, dad can be home in a half an hour to 45 minutes. And that's what it was for me. So one of the greatest fears that I had was her getting on the phone and calling my dad at work, because that meant that he'd come home and I was the focus of why he was coming home. So I was doing very poorly with my multiplication tables. My mom calls my dad, tells him that the grades are dropping, that, when he gets home, he needs help with this, and we need to do something as a family to take care of it. And my dad says, no, he'll come home right now. And my mom turns around and she told me that he was on his way home. And immediately my heart rate goes up. I start sweating. I'm shaking because I'm terrified of this man. And I have been my entire life. Thankfully, he's not with us anymore, so I don't have to fear him anymore. I still do, though. So anyway, he comes home. Takes about half an hour to get home. He comes in the door and he says, where's the flashcards for the multiplication tables? And my mom points to them. They're over, on the table there. And I was trying to do a little work on my own on some worksheets. And he says, Orpheus, come with me. We're going to work on this real quick. And he took me into my brother's room because it had a lock on the door. And he sat in front of me on the bed and put the flashcards in between us. And he would hold up one of the flashcards in front of me, and he would count to 3. And if I didn't get it by 3, he would put it down and slap me as hard as he could across the face. I learned the multiplication tables in an afternoon, that's for sure. I hated math the rest of my life, if that tells you something. But a lot of the experiences that I had because of, you've heard in some of the videos, I did stupid shit growing up, right? I did things that were unfathomable to normal behavior. I stole things. I burned shit down. I broke things. I made bad decisions and did shit like go to Florida when I had skipped some classes and I needed to go see the dean, right? And so I was always under a lot of stress because of that. And some of it was probably not under my control. The traumatic brain injury made it so sometimes I didn't have any impulse control. And so I would do things that would cause my parents to be upset. And it always came down to my dad coming home. And my mom was such an enabler. She didn't stop any of it. She didn't help at all. And there were times that he would physically abuse us so much, my brother and I, that I would say, I'm going to call the cops. I'm going to call 911 on you. And he would tell me, that's fine, but it's going to take him about 20 minutes to get here. He said, until they do, your ass is mine. And that really always stuck with me, that he really would be willing to be harmful to me or to my family if it was something that he felt he had to do. And he would abuse my mother. He would choke slam her up against the wall. And we're talking about a guy that would, during the day, was like a respected businessman who everyone envied. Everyone wanted to be with this man, to just hang out with him and share in his knowledge and stuff. And he'd come home and it was the most awful experience. He had this concept called sanctuary, which was if he didn't feel like being the abusive dad that weekend, he'd just say, this is sanctuary and we're going to ignore everything going on. And like we'd go up to ride motorcycles or be on boats or something. And there are some stories where I'll tell you about things that my dad and I did, and they'll sound really funny. And they are, but that was under the guise of sanctuary. And there was no physical threats, there was no violence, there was no intimidation. But then at the end of the weekend, you'd be driving home and spent the weekend like laughing and having fun, and dad's paying for everything, and we're going out and going to restaurants and laughing, and then at a certain point while we're driving home, I would still be in that mood, and I would turn to him and say something, and then seeing the hate staring back at me, and it was like he couldn't wait to get home, to go back to what it was. This was a man who, when you did something bad, you got beaten up with a belt or anything else that was around. And one time he hit me with a belt buckle in the head, and I still have a chunk missing out of my skull from that. But if you were bad, you got punished. If you were particularly good, you got something called a no spanking note. And this is, to this day, one of the most messed up concepts possible. So he would write one out for you, and you'd keep it. And if you got into trouble at some time in the future that was worth getting a beating for, you could go, no, wait, I have a no spanking note. Which just tells you that it wasn't about the punishment, it was about the enjoyment that man got out of abusing us. So the rest of my life, I've always been on edge and nervous, and that's just one of the things that was going on in my life while I was growing up. Abuse in other ways, in other places, from other people, pretty much constantly. And I think it was because I was vulnerable almost all of my life. I still am in a lot of ways, and I know a lot of you are too. But once you figure out what's going on, if there's a trauma, when I found out what was going on with me, and we started going into it, my therapist and I started writing things down in a journal of things that had happened to me, and then you finish that journal of at least, a few chapters of it, and you go back and you look at it, and you're like, I survived all of that. I got through all of that, and as messed up as I am today, I survived. I have to be stronger, right? I have to have gotten more independent, better. And I did. But I didn't know about it for so long, and it can affect your sleep. You can't sleep without night terrors. I'm on medication because one of the images that I always see is him coming down the hallway at me, swinging his arms. And he was a bigger guy. And the momentum that he would build coming down that hallway at you, it was terrible. I had night terrors my whole life after that, waking up screaming so many nights in a row that they put me on medication. I don't dream anymore. I don't. I might dream, but the medication makes it so it doesn't affect me while I'm sleeping, and I don't remember it when I wake up. And I'm thankful for that, because the dreams that I had over the years were almost as much of a case of PTSD as the actual abuse. And I was afraid to go to sleep a lot of the time because of that nightmare world that I would enter. I would relive everything that I went through. But the point is here today, you don't have to be that way. You don't have to suffer. You don't have to handle that all the time. You can get help. You can find someone near you that can help you with that. And believe me, we're going to cut this off now, but you believe me, you can survive. You can be better, and you can be a stronger person because of those experiences that you went through. Take them, own them. Understand that you can't change what happened, but you can change the way that you live from today on. You've heard today is the first day of the rest of your life. It's cliche, but it's true. You can decide your path from today. Some paths are a little bit more difficult, some are a little easier. But you can decide that path. You don't have to be that condition. If I survived, you can too. If you want to ask any questions, leave them below. I'll see what I can do. This one's been kind of tough for me. But I hope it's helped you, informed you a little bit about some of the turmoil that some people around you might be going through, or what you might be going through. Know one thing: you are not alone. No matter how weird you feel, how messed up your life feels, you are not alone ever. There's always people out there that care. Like me. I care about you, and others do too. We'll see you next time here on Orpheus Plays. I'm your old pal Orpheus. See ya.